Good morning. We'll get started here in just a second. Miss Leslie says the second is up, so we are going to start. All right, let's pray. Dear Lord and Heavenly Father, thank you for this day and the opportunity to come once again and study your word. Father, many of us, if not all of us, are very tired. But we thank you for the week that we were able to have, and we pray, God, that the fruit from VBS would continue. Lord, I pray as we come to your word that we would come with open hands and honest hearts. Lord, that you would give me clarity of thought and help me not to say anything silly or inappropriate to your word. Lord, I pray that you would guide our discussion in your name. Amen. All right, we are going to be a little bit of 2 chapters today because we didn't quite finish last week, but that was quite fortuitous because it fits actually very well with what's going on in chapter 6. So if you want to turn to Ecclesiastes, we'll start in chapter 5, and we'll continue 5:18, and we will continue through 6:12. All right, we will start. Behold, what I have seen to be good and fitting is to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil with which one toils under the sun, the few days of his life that God has given him. For this is his lot. Everyone also to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them and to accept his lot and rejoice in his toil, this is the gift of God. For he will not much remember the days of his life because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. There is an evil that I have seen under the sun, and it lies heavy on mankind. A man to whom God gives wealth, possessions, and honor, so that he lacks nothing of all that he desires, yet God does not give him power to enjoy them, but a stranger enjoys them. This is vanity and a grievous evil. If a man fathers 100 children and lives many years, so that the days of his life are many, but his soul is not satisfied with life's good things, and he also has no burial, I say that a stillborn child is better off than he. For it comes in vanity and goes in darkness, and in darkness its name is covered. Moreover, it has not seen the sun, nor known anything, yet it finds rest rather than he. Even though he should live 1,000 years twice over, yet enjoy no good, do not all go to the one place. All the toil of man is for his mouth, yet his appetite is not satisfied. For what advantage has the wise man over the fool? And what does the poor man have who knows how to conduct himself before the living? Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of the appetite. This also is vanity and a striving after wind. Whatever has come has already been named, and what is known, and it is known what man is, and that he is not able to dispute with one stronger than he. The more words, the more vanity, and what advantage to man? For who knows what is good for man while he lives the few days of his vain life, which he passes like a shadow? For who can tell man what will be after him under the sun? So, interestingly enough, we're kind of, I just bumped my phone. Sorry, y'all. We are at the halfway point, really, when you look at the book, when you get to the end of chapter 6. I mean, when you look at it in English, it's basically the halfway point, but it's also the halfway point in his argument that he has been making and building up to this point. But today we're going to look at, and I'm not going to take I don't think it's a much different approach, but I see chapter 6 as kind of a microcosm of an argument and a thread that he's been weaving through the biblical text to this point, which is why I kind of titled this section, Frustrated Good. Nobody tells you this in preaching class, but titling stuff is really challenging. It's either too corny or too technical or highly forgettable, but it is what it is. But I was like, frustrated good. Anyways. But basically, what Kohelet is and our preacher is talking about at this point is there's 2 ways to really describe one's life. There's really 2 categories that you can find yourself falling into. There's lots of different anecdotes, lots of different stories. He has described personal observation, personal experience. But at the end of the day, you can generally, I see 2 very prominent themes to this point. You can either live a frustrated existence, your life can be punctuated and described by frustration, or it can be described by good. And defining those two things is quite important. And that's what he has done to this point. When you look at when I say frustrated, it's these references that we see to a grievous evil. There is an evil, there is an injustice, there is a problem. And then he, throughout the chapters, has been building on this idea that human beings, himself included, can spend their entire lives pursuing material good, intellectual good, familial good, and it still amount to nothing. And so we see it. I put some examples up. The texts are there, and for the sake of time, I'm not going to read all of them. But we kind of, let me get on the right page here. When we kind of look at chapter 2, we go to chapter 2, and we see did I put that correctly? Oh, no. No, is this page upside down? Yes, it is. I think we all should have a disclaimer on anyone who talks today and said, were you in VBS? And it's not a good enough excuse. But man, words are just everywhere right now. But yeah, no, I stapled that backwards. But we see in 2:20, I gave up my heart to despair over all the toil of my labors, because someone who has toiled with wisdom, knowledge, and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by someone else. It's a vanity and a great evil. What is a man from all the toil and striving of heart which he toils under the sun? So we see this theme, and he repeats it quite often, of riches earned but not enjoyed, accomplishments made but not enjoyed. And then he goes to chapter 4, and he highlights the injustice, especially injustice in the one location, in the singular locations where you should expect justice, which is the law courts. And again, as the king of Israel, and taking that persona as the king of Israel, he would have control over that injustice, but it's still there. He can't escape it. The oppressed continue to be oppressed. The wicked continue to get pardoned. The wrong team always gets the red cards, if you were watching last night. But it's just, and it's not just. He had FIFA in mind when he wrote these passages. But I'll leave that as it is. But there's injustice. And then we go into chapter 5. We go to 13. There's a grievous evil. Riches were kept by their owner to his hurt. So we have a guy who's saving up. He's actually doing the right thing because he wants to leave a legacy, but he loses it in a bad venture. You could live your entire life, you manage your finances perfectly, and as soon as you hit retirement, the stock market crashes. And if it wasn't in solid gold under your basement, then it's all just kind of gone. And then that's life. Frustrated. It's frustrating. And again, we see it in chapter 6. In our chapter today, we see it again. Riches gained, accomplishments gained, but others enjoy it. So what point is there for all the effort and all the toil and all the struggle when we don't even get to experience? One author says you build it all up, but you don't have the appetite to enjoy it. And so it's like that picture, you could spend all day in the kitchen, and you have the best meats and the best trappings, and then you put the meal together, and you taste it, and as the cook, you're very judgmental. You're going to be like, this is lousy. Everybody else gets to enjoy it. They're like, hey, this is a great steak. And you're like, yeah, it's actually kind of mid. But it's there. That was for the kids. I'm just throwing that term out there. And we see it. I just pulled examples, because if you just even do a word search, it's quite simple to just say evil or grievous evil, depending on your translation in the English, and just kind of trace it through. He keeps coming back to these things that just kind of dig in his side a bit and just lead to a frustrating existence. He doesn't disacknowledge that God is good and that God can provide, but here's the one thread. And then you have the other thread that he constantly comes back to. Starting at chapter 2, 24 through 25, there is nothing better for a person that he should eat, drink, and find enjoyment in his toil. This is from the hand of God. For apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? Chapter 3, verse 12, and you'll kind of see it's repeated even on the slide there. God grants the ability to have joy in ... and it was a small slide, so I had to have clunky grammar there, but eat, drink, and work. From the gift of God, God grants joy. God is the one who provides and gives the ability to enjoy that which he provides. And so we see that in chapter 2. We see that in chapter 3, 12, 13, and again in verse 22. There is nothing better that a man should rejoice in his work. I have perceived that there is nothing better for them to be joyful and do good as long as they live, and that everyone should eat, drink, and take pleasure in all his toil, as this is God's gift to man. Chapter 5, it is better. Again, that's the idea when the key word that you see in the text is it is better, I have perceived. This is a better option. It's better to have honest worship. Guard your steps when you go to the house of God. Listening and being humble before the word and in your worship is better than offering the sacrifice of fools. We see that in chapter 5, verse 1. They don't know that they're doing evil. So it's better, again, a better way to approach God is to not come at him with your piousness, with your religiosity. Be honest. Honest worship versus the pious spin that we like to present before people where we're not ourselves. We're not presenting our true nature. And we come to church and we come to God, whether it's in our own personal prayers or in our own approach corporately, and we're fakes. We're the stained glass masquerade kind of a picture where we present a front, but there's a better way to live. And he keeps weaving that through. And then again, we see it in 5:18 again, 18 through 20. It is good and fitting to eat, drink, find enjoyment in all the toil. Everyone to whom, and this is actually our passage today, 5:18. It is good and fitting to eat, drink, and find enjoyment in all the toil which one toils under the sun in the few days of his life that God has given him, for this is his lot. Everyone to whom God has given wealth, possessions, and power to enjoy them, to accept his lot and rejoice in his toil, this is the gift of God. For he will not much remember his day. This is a great verse. He will not much remember his days because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. So yeah, all's that to say there's two options for living that Kohelet, the preacher, has presented to us consistently, even through all the random asides that he has taken in his wisdom meanderings. And again, one way to help my brain at least to think about why can't he just talk in a straight line sometimes as you read these first 6 chapters is he is in a group. He is in a group of eclectic and mixed people of various philosophical and religious backgrounds, and he's having a philosophical discussion. So as things come up to your mind, have you ever been in a conversation, you said that one keyword that then triggers this keyword, and then before you know it, you're like, what rabbit hole did we just go down? We took the left at Albuquerque, and we're nowhere near where we started. And then he circles back and goes, okay, now back to the main point. But there's 2 main things he's been driving at. There's God's way of living and our way. Just 2 choices on the shelf, pleasing God or pleasing self, if you grew up in the wilds. But God's way is characterized by joy, by enjoyment. We see that constantly. And again, it's always joy, and not far from the word enjoyment, joy, better, always seems to be the word toil. So it's not like you're escaping the rigors of life and therefore you are able to be happy. It's that in the rigors of life, in the hevel of life, God's way of living is characterized by joy and contentment. We see that in our section today, but we've seen it before. Accepting your lot as from the Lord. And we'll talk about what that means. And I'm taking all of this, by the way, at least the God's way part. It's what we've talked about, but we see this in 18 through 20. It's just a breakdown. We see proper worship, a proper alignment to God. We accept God's gifts when we are rightly aligned to God. So when we see in verses, God has given, I lost it. Untoils under the sun, except the few days that God has given him, for this is his lot. Also, everyone to whom God has given wealth, possessions, and power, this is the gift of God. So again, when I'm using the category of worship, it's that proper alignment before the Lord. Man, I am losing my train of thought here. Let me take a 2-second pause. Drink of water. What's up? Uh-oh. Anyways, to see something as the gift of God implies proper alignment to God. That was the baseline point I was going for. My apologies for the kerfuffle there. And then death. And I put that in quotation marks because we know theologically that death was never part of God's initial plan. Death is a terrible blight on God's good world. But again, when we are living in a broken world under the reign of Yahweh, and our lives are characterized by joy, contentment, worship, it's also kind of characterized by recognizing that our time is limited, that we only have a small bit to use on this earth, and then we will be with him in eternity if we are his children. But like when we see at the end in verse 20, he will not remember the days of his life, implying that there is a limited temporal limit to the days of his life, and God keeps him occupied with joy. So death is still part of the way in which we live right now. It's complicated. That's why I put the quotations mark on it, because I don't want to ever imply that death is a good thing. Like, it's never a good thing. To be absent with the body is to be present with the Lord. So theologically, big picture, we know that part, but like we should never get calloused with death as if it was part of God's intent from the beginning, because it certainly was not. And then we have our way of living, which again is thread through and hit in chapter 6 almost in its entirety. And it's defined by meaningless hedonism. So again, pursuing all those pleasures of the world. And we can see that back in chapter 2, in his own personal life, his pursuit of work accomplishment, wealth accomplishment, pleasure, all of those things. And at the end of the day, it's all just hedonistic. It's all just there, and it's meaningless, and it's there and gone. Or we can have morbid escapism. We see a theme through here, and we've talked about his somewhat obsessive return to the topic of death as we go through chapters 1 through 5. And he hits it in a really harsh tone today. But there's that idea where it's like let's just escape this world. Like, I can't deal with it. This world is pointless. My life is defined by meaningless pursuit of empty pleasure. Like, let's just live out my days and die. Like, what else is there to really look forward to? And we just see him constantly coming back to that kind of just escapism. Like, I can't deal with the ambiguity of life, so it would just be better. He says it in, I think it's chapter 4, better is the guy that has died. He doesn't have to see all this stuff anymore. You're out of this ugly world, good for him. And you have that type of approach. And so that's what we're going to look at today. And don't worry, that wasn't all just introduction, because at the end of the day, chapter 6, it's 12 verses. We're tacking on 3 verses from chapter 5. But it's just it's like you're listening to a track of music, and it's like, I've heard this melody before, and we're going to hear his melody again, and it's going to shift now as we go into future weeks. Next week, if you look ahead at chapter 7, it's a lot of what looks like Proverbs. And so he'll start shifting away from this heavy drum beat that he's been beating now for 6 chapters. He'll still come back to it, but it won't be the predominant melody anymore, or at least just not as pronounced. So I'll pause there so we can all catch our breath. I apologize. I've been told I talk too fast, and every time I think I'm talking slower, I think I talk faster. But is there any comments to this point before we jump into today's text? I do want to save a decent amount of time at the end for some just applicational thoughts and discussion. So I don't want it to be all me just hitting you with information. But any initial thoughts? Have you noticed this thread? Is it just me? Did I make it up? Joe says it's definitely there. He's the elder. We will keep moving. And it's not intimidating at all to be like lined up perfectly with Joel as he sits there in his contemplative pose. It was like when Brian used to sit here and he would be kind of hunched over with his arms folded. That was so intimidating. It's like, I'm teaching Old Testament and Brian's sitting right here. But just to bring some levity. But yeah, let's look at God's way in 5:18. And we see God's definition of the good life defined again and again. I hope we don't chafe at the term the good life. We'll talk about this a little bit later. But this is actually a theme that's woven through the entire Bible. There is a way of living well that God intended, even in a broken environment as we find ourselves in, where it's okay to say, what is the good life? And you'll, like, when you see the word blessed in a lot of the Bible, blessed is the man who, tree planted by the rivers of water, meditates on the law day and night, doesn't hang out with fools, his way will be prosperous. Like, that's the idea. Like, what is the good life? A good life is one that is firmly planted in God's word. And in the application point, we'll talk about some of how Jesus would talk about this as well. But it's not wrong for us as Christians. I know it's a bad book title, but like, it's not wrong to talk about what is a good life in God's good earth, subjected to Him. So again, it's characterized by joy. I have seen it to be good and fitting to eat, drink, and find enjoyment in all the toil that we toil with under the sun, that God has given him, for this is his lot. Everyone also to whom God has given wealth, possessions, and the power to enjoy them and to accept his lot and rejoice in his toil, this is the gift of God. For he will not much remember the days of his life, because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. One couple notes I just want to make on this topic here. When we look at the riches, the wealth, eating and drinking, and finding enjoyment, it's not quantified. I think that's helpful, because in my brain at least, it's like, I'm happy now, but I'd be really happy if my bank account would double. And so it's like when the author here is giving us wealth, possessions, honor, he's not saying a certain amount is required for you, therefore, to then have joy. So again, in his context, he's the richest guy in the world having this conversation at this time. But for us reading this, it's important to realize that our lot is not defined by a price tag, by a bank account number, by health, but that enjoyment in life. Verse 20 can apply to you and to me, no matter how poor we are on this earth or how rich we are on this earth. If we're eating, if we had something to eat today, and we had something to drink today, we have somewhere to sleep that was cool and safe and warm, or warm in my wife's case, but cool in mine, you are wealthy. And it's like, again, we like the person meeting in, hiding in their basement in China, trying to worship the Lord with, can't buy anything, has no social credit, living off of the benevolence of others, can still have enjoyment. And that verse about enjoying and not even feeling the days, death. I put it here at the end, but like when it says, he will not much remember the days of his life, because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. I put that as days are numbered, but they're not felt. And we know what wouldn't that be amazing? It's like time just goes by, and it's like, no matter how gnarly my life is, how messed up and how poor or rich I am, because of the enjoyment that God grants and gives to me when I'm rightly aligned and in his word, I don't even feel those days. Contentment. We talk about your lot. When I hear your lot, I think about the old West, where everybody was rushing west, Mom, Pa, Kettle, or not Mom, Pa, Ingalls. If you know Mom, Pa, Kettle, that's a deep cut. Anybody? Yeah. It was like the goofiest comedy sketch, like black and white farm comedy, but tells you what was at the library in South Dakota when you could rent VHSs. So that's what I grew up on. But Mom and Pa Ingalls, you had the West Boone, where people would go out and they would get their plot of land. They would get like, hey, we're going to go, what's the word I'm looking for? It wasn't colonize, but it was settle. I knew there was a more gentle word of saying that. You would go to you would get registered, and you would get your lot. And maybe your lot included a water source, maybe it didn't, maybe you had to travel for water, maybe it had some shade, maybe it had some wood, maybe it had good till ground, but that was your lot. So that's what comes into my mind is, the Lord has allowed whatever circumstances, whatever background, whatever family you were born into, I was born into, and the circumstances, my education, my environment, that's my lot. And how much time, contentment with that lot. Like, I really wish that the Lord had at least made my parents taller to grow. Like, so I wish I could be taller. I had visions of basketball grandeur and soccer grandeur as a high schooler, and then I stopped at 5'5", and that was basically it. But that's my lot. And how many people just sit around, how many times I sit around and just like, man, I'm just complaining. I look in the mirror and I'm just not happy with what God gave me. Or I look at my education, I'm not happy with where God put me. I grew up here and I'm not happy with the parents. I wish my parents had more money, and you can just be so frustrated and discontent with the things that God has placed in your life. And contentment with one's lot is so elusive. We see that in the New Testament. Godliness with contentment is great gain. But it's tough. And so then worship, occupied with joy from God. We don't get to that status of having our hearts so enraptured with God easily. It has to be given by God. God grants us the ability to enjoy Him. And I think sometimes the pressures and pangs of life crowd things so much that we're not happy. We're especially not happy with God sometimes. And, to a degree, the Bible allows us that frustration as long as it doesn't stay there. You see that tension in the Psalms, and you see it throughout the Bible. Life. I was born in a really hard life. We hear the concept of privilege. It's a very triggering word, but some people were born with the silver spoon, and some people were born on the rough side of the tracks. Both, through the grace and gift of God, can eventually or hopefully find themselves occupied with joy in God. And so that's God's way. 4 basic points in these 3 verses, but again, that thread has been woven throughout the entire Bible. And it was whoa, John, we got 12 more verses. We're going to move pretty quickly through these because I don't want to dwell so much on things that he's already talked about a lot of these. These are not new concepts that we haven't discussed before. But when we look at meaningless hedonism, what is it described by? What is, again, 2 ways of describing and living and sitting in life. 6, 1 through 12. I'm not going to read it all again, but I'm just going to hit the high points. Heaviness. We see that in verse 1, sorry. I was finding it. There is an evil that I have seen under the sun, and it lies heavy on mankind. And again, maybe not you, maybe the person sitting next to you or somebody you know, but how would you describe the day-to-day conversations you have with people outside of church, or even in your own family? Do you walk away from a conversation with a loved one that's going through some struggles and you just feel light and airy and happy? No, isn't life just heavy? Doesn't it feels heavy right now? Wars, rumors of wars, politics, society, heaviness. Again, we hit that theme of lacks nothing. You could have everything that this world has to offer. You could have security of health, finances, and possession, and not have the ability to enjoy them. What I find, just going back to my job a little bit, but Jeff Bezos seems really happy, but he's not, he's retired, but he's not retired. So he still can't, he's enjoying his riches, but I might actually have more day-to-day happiness than he can, even though he's infinitely richer than I'll ever be. And it's just, we understand that dynamic when you read the newspaper. It's not hard, but it's just, you can have everything, but at the end of the day, have nothing. Nothing matters. We see this great example of perpetual lineage. You could have 100 kids. You could live to be 2,000 years old. You could have perpetual lineage and perpetual life, and it still be frustrated. It still be characterized by that tension and frustration that, again, our speaker can't seem to avoid. But I think a lot of us find ourselves in this boat as well. You can have an insatiable appetite. You see this in verse 7. All toil is for his mouth, yet his appetite is not satisfied. Again, that, the You could put it in food terms, you could put it in work terms, money terms. We all get this, just that the eye is never full. We saw this in chapter 1 at the very beginning. The eye is never filled with seeing. The rivers can fill the ocean, but the ocean never overflows. We can want and grind and push for something and never be satisfied. You could have hollow advantages. The wise and fool, like what advantage is it if you're the smartest guy in the room or the dumbest guy in the room if you all have the same outcome? You can be characterized by vanity. People love to talk. People love to talk about many things that they probably shouldn't be talking about themselves. And, again, more words, more vanity. Do I need to say anything? All you got to do is open your podcast menu and see 5 billion new podcasts every day. And it's like, I'm sorry, there can't be that many good things and novel things to be listening to. It drives me nuts, and it's just vanity. You're constantly chasing. We see this in 9 and 10. This is a really tricky one. I'm not going to spend much time on it, but better is the sight of the eye than the wandering of the appetite. That wandering of the eye picture is, again, just never being able to be singularly focused and content with what's in front of you. You're constantly doing this. You're constantly, hey, I got a job, but I'm still on Indeed seeing what other jobs might still be there. You're never singularly focused. And again, in verse 10, whatever has come has already been named. What is known, it is known what man is, and he is not able to dispute with one stronger than he. What has already been, we keep trying to, one of the commentators said, we keep trying to redefine reality, but reality was set by God. So that idea of arguing with somebody stronger than you can't. God has set this up. Here we are. And you're not able to accept your lot if you're constantly trying to change that reality that you're in. We have heard that. We see it in the news. We see it in interviews. I'm just trying to, change my outcome, I'm gonna get my family out of this part of the suburbs into the nicer part of the suburbs. No, it's like we keep trying to shift reality to make it work for us instead of just aligning ourselves to the reality that God has placed us in. Again, accepting our lot. And then morbid escapism. We've seen him say it's been better if you're, if you die prematurely or you just die at the end of your life so you no longer have to deal with the tensions of life. But we see a really harsh example in chapter 3, in verses 3 through 5, of it's better if you were never born. And he gives us 3 verses describing that. They never have to see this. They never have to experience this. This is really tough stuff. When we talk about the harshness of wisdom literature, I really did not enjoy reading and studying and thinking through these verses because I know, these are examples that can hit very close. And then there's just that calloused resignation of whatever, the hands-up mentality. Who knows what is good for man while he lives the few days of his vain life? He just stacks it on there. I want to I'm going to give myself a hard stop because I want to give us some time to just talk through some applicational questions and just kind of hopefully land the plane with this thread that he's been weaving. Note the relatively short list between God's way and our way, and what does this suggest? I thought this was interesting. It's observational. I'm not saying I have deep, Luther didn't give me this idea or anything like that. It's just, isn't it interesting that when we look at the descriptors of our way and we see the various adjectives that can describe the person that's pursuing meaningless, hedonistic pursuits of pleasure, eat, drink, and be merry. And it's just, there's so many, it's so complicated. It's heaviness, it's lack of enjoyment, it's all these various things that we're trying to grab, and it's just always elusive, and it's stressful. It's stressful reading this list, because I feel it. Insatiable appetite, check. Hollow advantages. Yeah, I think I'm better than so-and-so because I'm smarter or whatever. Or, I should, I'm wise, I'm smart. I went to college. I should have a better job. It's just stressful to read. But when you look at God's way, joy, contentment, proper worship, living life well by the gift and grace of God. I'm not saying it's easy. It's just simple. God did not I don't think the Lord designed life to be so complicated it's never attainable. And it's certainly not unattainable with His grace. Why is contentment and joy So elusive, and what does Ecclesiastes suggest as the root cause? I've kind of highlighted my view on it, but any thoughts strike you? Not keeping one's eyes on God, says Leslie.
I would suggest that. The first one, a relatively shorter list between God's way and our way, it's indicative of that sinful nature and the discontentment expressed in many ways, plus also looking at life on this earth, which is, it's cursed right now, right? It's cursed, so it's observational of what is the reality of what's going on here. And because of our sinful nature, which is discontent, selfish, all those things, not ignoring the reality of what he's saying, but to me it's indicative of the fact that we focus so much on those things, and we do miss the simplicity.
Yeah.
Simplicity. So, for example, joy. You say, well, my circumstances are terrible. How do I still have joy in that? We miss that. Our natural tendency is to go to the complaining,
Yep.
the comparison,
Yep.
all of that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's my thoughts on the first one.
Yeah, it's just to kind of echo on that. Like, again, joy is always not far away in Ecclesiastes from toil. So whatever that toil that we're living within. And so, yeah, there's times when, if we can take one point from Ecclesiastes to this point, life is a lot more complicated than we wish it was, even when we're trying to do the right thing. And so, yeah, it's so easy to look at the circumstances and completely leave God out of the equation still. I would never live like him under the sun, without a focus on God. And, feel like we're constantly called back to remember and be challenged on how hard it is to have a heavenly view, or what is it in Colossians? Turn your mind on things above, not on things of this earth. Do you believe that and this is related, but do you believe that your joy with your lot is not defined by your status or stuff? Again, you don't have to say, John, that's a great question, and my life is totally characterized by that. It's more rhetorical, more reflective. Again, that's one of the benefits of wisdom literature, is that, the idea is that you brew a good, cup of tea and sit quietly and chew on things and meditate on things. Like, that's why there's so many questions in that teaching style. But, I can't have joy with my lot because I don't have such and such, or my life did not turn out such and such a way. Yes?
My impression that the Bible uses the word reward. So every time that you keep saying lot, it uses reward. And I was just
Go ahead.
it just kind of changes how you think of it, when you think of those things
Yeah.
as being a reward.
No, for the stream, Katie brings up, some translations will translate that word for lot as reward. At the end of the day, the idea, though, is that it's something you receive. So you can, it's a translational option. And you're right, it does give a different viewpoint through which, a different lens to look at the verse with. But at the end of the day, the concept is, whether it's a reward where you are granted something, or you are apportioned something, you're still at the receiving end of something somewhat outside of your control. And so, yeah, there's quite a few translational nuances. I almost prefer the NIV, but I'm agreeing with what we're doing the ESV right now. But that's an interesting point. I don't have a perfect answer, in terms of how it breaks, why one translation chose one or one chose the other. But I do recognize that, if you were to just change these words in one's translation, if we look at just verse 18, I have seen what is good, fitting to drink and find enjoyment. The few days of his life that God has given him, for this is his reward. It still doesn't fundamentally change the meaning of the verse, but it is a different way of viewing it and thinking about it. Like whether you think of your life as the reward for your actions or it's a lot granted to you in front. Is that kind of the idea? Yeah. It's challenging, Lauren.
Kind of the previous question and this question together. I think we look at what we have and we're never satisfied.
Yeah.
So we look at what other people have and we think they have it better, not recognizing that with the better that we think they have comes problems that we don't know about.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And but we focus so much of our time and attention on not having what we think we want.
Yeah.
And it was very life-changing for me to accept what God has given me, and it has brought joy. So there is that record. If you can recognize that what God has given you is God has given you this because this is what He has for you. Like, and this is good.
Yeah.
Because He's good. And He wants my best. So to have more would not have been healthy for me.
Yeah.
To have less would not have been healthy for me. So what I have is what I have because God saw that as the best for me.
Yeah.
If you can come to that conclusion, you can have the joy in life that you're suggesting that
Yeah.
God's will is.
That's a really good point. Got one more minute here. Do you hear the echoes? Oh man, that's bad grammar. Do you hear the echoes of this lesson in the teachings of Jesus, and where? So the correlation between a lot of what we talked about, God's way versus our way, in the life and teaching of Jesus. And I would simply suggest that you could look primarily at the Sermon on the Mount. When you see that idea of the blessed, blessed is the one who blessed are they that mourn, blessed are the merciful. Like another translation for that is happy. Happy are those people. Happy, again, and it's not something we attain to. We don't attain to be a persecuted Christian, per se. But if you find yourself in that setting, you can still be happy, following God's way. Again, somewhat simplistic. And then this is another rhetorical question. Is your life characterized by contented joy or frustrated anxiety? Kind of just leave it there. We have a minute. I'm gonna try and read this, but in the study, this quote kept coming back. It was one that one of the authors or commentators brought up. But I just thought we can just end on this. This was written by a Holocaust individual, somebody who was in the Holocaust, actually died in the concentration camps. But this was from her journals towards the end. You have made me so rich, O God. Please let me share out your beauty with open hands. My life has become an uninterrupted dialogue with you, O God, one great dialogue. Sometimes when I stand in some corner of the camp, my feet planted on your earth, my eyes raised toward your heaven, tears sometimes run down my face, tears of deep emotion and gratitude. At night, too, when I lie in my bed and rest in you, O God, tears of gratitude run down my face, and that is my prayer. I have been terribly tired for several days, but that too will pass. Things come and go in a deeper rhythm, and people must be taught to listen. It is the most important thing we have to learn in this life. I always end up with one single word, God. The beat of my heart has grown deeper, more active, and yet more peaceful, as if I were all the time storing up inner riches. And I just read that, and again, we've read quotes like that, before in various readings, and I'm sure in our own personal study. But I would love for that to be the prayer of my heart. And this is somebody in the camps, and yet I'm in 21st century America, and I am more characterized at times by frustration than joy and contentment. So just a challenge to leave you all with. Dear Lord, I pray, God, that your word would echo in our ears, not mine. Lord, that as we are challenged and encouraged from your word, Lord, that we would rest in what you have given us in this world, Lord, that we would not constantly see the riches or the prosperity of others, but that we would, as the psalmist, go to the house of God and see their ultimate outcome and then see what you have provided in its place, Lord. And we want more of you and less of ourselves in our day-to-day. Lord, I pray that you would be with the worship coming up, be with Matt as he preaches, or as the worship is led, Lord, that you would just give strength and give us ears and hearts to hear.